If we go ahead and grab our seats, we'll restart and rejoin with the strategic and, oh, nope, I'm sorry. I was about to call on Bob and it's not his turn. Not at all. Eleanor, it is your turn though, for the A&O committee.
Thank you, James. Good afternoon. Welcome to Augusta, Georgia. I'm Eleanor Hobson, Chair of the Administrative and Outreach Committee for the CAB. Our members are Kathy Patterson, Vice Chair, David Hoyle, Earl Shepard, Nina Spinelli, Ed Sturkin, and our newest CAB member, Joyce Underwood. I would like to invite other CAB members to join the Administrative and Outreach Committee. Our purpose is on the screen. Although our membership campaign has ended for the year, we are always seeking new members. Membership applications can be found on the back table or on our website. Our website is cab.srs.gov. The Board Beat magazine for spring 2017 is available. There are copies at your places and on the handouts table. Members, the CAB outreach schedule is in your packet. Please watch your email for additional volunteer opportunities. And we are looking for volunteers, especially for the STEM Career Connections Fair, which will be at the Kroc Center in Augusta on October 19th from 8 a.m. until noon. It is a wonderful experience. Please volunteer to assist us during the morning. There are many youth throughout the CSRA who attend this Connections Fair, and it is a very educational and exciting moment for everyone. If you would like more information on the CAB, visit our website. I will announce it again, cab.srs.gov. For the update for the Administrative and Outreach Committee, just to inform you that we like mentoring so much that we have asked our former CAB members to mentor as much as possible, mentor us. We had our first informal luncheon yesterday, and it was a success. Thank you very much, Harold, Marilyn, and Ed, for attending our first CAB alumni luncheon. We hope that it will become an annual event with the CAB. There are no presentations for the Administrative and Outreach Committee today. And that is all. You're welcome.
Like you mentioned, the membership drive for the current year is closed because we just got our new members, but we are going to start ramping up soon. Can I get my members who are in their 6th year to raise their hands for just a moment? We got 1, 2, a couple others. I think you are, Remy. Just 3 of you. So we know we got that many people who are going to be rolling off at the end of this year, at the end of the January meeting. And Ed Sturkin, yeah. So we're going to be looking for a good many members. And Gil asked yesterday at the A&O committee, can he go out and try to find people? And the answer is yes, every one of you can. So you asked something similar to that, and I twisted it to fit my own needs.
Nina said no wordsmithing.
But no, that's just the EM Rex. This is fine. This is me. I can do what I want. But what I'd like you to do is take a couple applications and see if you can't find a few folks to help join the CAB and apply. With that, Bob, are you ready for your update? Or if you have anything to add from yesterday's?
Bob Dorr, CAB. No, I'm all set to go. Okay, my name is Bob Dorr. I am the chair of the Strategic and Legacy Management Committee. I want to welcome everyone to Augusta, Georgia. and day 2 of our full cab board meeting. The slide you see right here is a listing of our committee members, and I won't read all their names, but there you are. Next slide, please. Next slide is our committee purpose. This committee purpose is the same as it's been recently, and again, I won't read this, but you're welcome to understand it and look at it. We have recommendation status updates. Open recommendation 338, the revision of the Savannah Riverside Community Involvement Plan. That will still be an open recommendation for now. And of course, we have a recommendation 342, military training at the Savannah River site. And on today's agenda, our committee has discussed this recommendation 342. And our committee feels it can be closed with the response we received from DOE. We'll conduct a vote of the full board to close that recommendation shortly. Next slide, please. Okay, and I do want to announce our next committee meeting, again, is scheduled for June 13th from 4:30 p.m. to 6:20 p.m. at the DOE Meeting Center. That's 230 Village Green Boulevard, Suite 220 in Aiken. All public are invited to attend. All CAB members are welcome to attend, and obviously our committee members are welcome to attend, and it's available online. Okay, today's presentation, we've got a budget update by John Lopez, our friend who knows all the finances with the Department of Energy and the federal government. So there is some news. Continuing, my understanding is a continuing resolution for 2017 budget was approved earlier this month. And when I went out for lunch today, I heard budget was submitted by the President for fiscal year 2018. So we might be able to get some information from John in regards to that. And then also, in my absence yesterday, David Hoyle conducted our Strategic and Legacy Management Committee update. And we had 2 recommendations that we'll be voting on today. And the one recommendation is the SRS strategic plan, and recommendation manager on that was David Vavakis, and we'll discuss that as well and vote on it. And then the other recommendation that was recommendation manager was Nina Spinelli, and that was on prescribed fires within the Savannah River site. So at this point, I think we'd like to invite John Lopez to do his presentation.
Thank you, Bob. Once again, my name is John Lopez, and I am the Director of Integration and Planning for DOE, and my organization is responsible for preparing all the congressional budget requests that go to headquarters and then eventually make it on to Congress to request funding for the Savannah River site, for the EM portion of the Savannah River site. So what I want to talk about today is where we are for fiscal year 17. As Bob said, at lunchtime today, the President released his budget for 2018, so I'll briefly talk about that, and then I'll give you an update on where we are for fiscal year 19 as well. So here's a chart for the last 3 years, 15, 16, and 17. As you know, fiscal year 17, we were working under a continuing resolution until May 5th. That's when Congress passed an omnibus bill to give us our full spending throughout the year. The good news is we are up from $1337 last year to $1368 this year, which is a $31 million increase from 16 to 17. So that's great news for the site. And as you can see, over the past 3 years, our funding does continue to increase over that period of time. So that's good news. And then for fiscal year 18, I don't have a lot of details right now, but I know our top number right now for the site is $1,447 billion. So we're up another $79 million between 17 and 18. So that's, once again, that's good news for the site. headquarters and Congress continue to see that the importance that the site is playing in the EM cleanup mission, and they continue to increase our funding from year to year. So I think we've been great stewards of taxpayers' dollars. We continue to make great progress, and that's being recognized through the budget numbers that you're seeing here from year to year. So a couple of things I want to highlight in fiscal year 17. So you'll see for between 16 and 17 for nuclear materials, we've got a $23 million increase between 16 and 17. A lot of that is because when we moved into fiscal year 17, we had very little carryover dollars. In previous years, if we didn't spend money one year, it carries over to the next year. And those carryover dollars have been dwindling from year to year. So going in from 16 to 17, we have very little carryover dollars to go into 17 to continue our operations. So we needed additional funding in 17 to make up for that. Another thing we're doing is, as you all know, we have an aging workforce at the site. And if I have an experienced nuclear operator who retires, I just don't go out on the street and hire somebody to replace them. It takes 2.5 to 3 years to train, qualify, get a security clearance for somebody to replace somebody who's actually retiring. So we are on a kick right now to hire several operators for the nuclear materials program. So that's one of the things that we're doing with this increased funding for fiscal year 17. And then in addition, we had a dissolver that we needed to replace. That was about a $3 million project, and we also did that in fiscal year 17 as well. So that explains the increase between 16 and 17. For PBS 13, our solid waste PBS, as many of you know, WIP is now open again. So we are now having to characterize some of our waste shipments that are ready to go to WIP. We have to go and do another look at those containers, at that waste, to make sure it meets the waste acceptance criteria for WIP. And so we've dedicated some additional resources in fiscal year 17 so we could characterize that waste and prepare those shipments to go to WIP, and we have started shipping waste to WIP in this fiscal year. In addition to that, we have a big project going on in PBS 13. It's the A Area Firewater Project. There's a tank, a firewater tank in A Area that supports the fire suppression system in SRNL. That tank is aging, it's rusted, and it was no longer usable. So we've embarked on a project to replace this tank. We actually started that project in fiscal year 15, and it's rolling over into 16 and 17, and we'll complete it in fiscal year 18. Another highlight here is SWPF. Went from 194 to 160. As all you know, SWPF construction is complete. So this is kind of the normal progression of funding going down from construction now into commissioning. SDU 6, $35 million in 16, $8 million in 17. We've completed construction on SDU 6, which Gene is going to talk about here after me, and that project is getting ready the construction's complete, and we're getting ready to start up operations on SDU 6. Another big one, okay? Everybody knows SWPF is going to create salt. In order to create salt, you've got to have a place to dispose it. So SDU 6 is done, and right on the heels of that, we're going to start SDU 7. So this is a big thing for us. We asked Congress for a new start in construction for SDU 7. Shane Farrell is going to talk about that after I'm done. So we got money allocated this fiscal year that we can go ahead and get started on SDU 7. And then lastly, an increase in security. Part of this is normal escalation. You know, our guards are unionized. They get raises, 3% raises or whatever it is each year. So their funding needs to go up each year. But then we have a security entrance project that we're upgrading for H Canyon. So we've allocated some additional money in fiscal year 17 to, we've already started that project and we hope to complete it in fiscal year 18, but we've allocated more money this fiscal year to get that project started. So So for fiscal year 17, a good news story. Fiscal year 18, I'd hope to have a chart that showed the detail by PBS, but the president hadn't released his budget, so I'm not allowed to preempt that. So, but I do know that the budget's gone up from 1368 to 1447 billion in fiscal year 18. So where are we for fiscal year 19? Last Friday, all the sites just got direction to start our fiscal year 19 process. We've all been given a preliminary funding target that we're to work to. And so we're now in the process of pulling together our fiscal year 19 budget. Can't tell you what our target is. It's all embargoed information. I know it's going to change because the process is all the sites are given a target. We all go through and develop our what we can and can't do under that target, and then headquarters goes and readjusts that target as they see the priorities are for the EM program. I do want to thank the CAB. You guys gave us your priorities for fiscal year 19, and Shelley and from DHEC and Rob Pope from EPA also gave us what their priorities are for fiscal year 19. Those priorities will be taken in consideration whenever we prepare our fiscal year 19 budget. So with that being said, I think that's all I have for the budget update. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Nina?
Thank you so much. I just have a quick question, and I think I might have asked it before, but for FY 2015, for PBS 20, it was 138, and then it went down to 128, and now it's rebounded back to 135. Do you feel like you need to be above the 138 threshold for security with everything that's going on, or is that a good number?
We could always use more money. We're comfortable with the 135. The 138 increase, there was $10 million allocated for the H Canyon Argus project. Okay, so it's really 128 for operations. They gave us an additional $10 million for H Canyon Argus, and then there's about $5 million of this 135 that's going to complete that project. So that's why the increase was in fiscal year 15.
Thank you.
Bob Dork, CAB. John, thank you for the budget update. John, this morning, I'm wondering if you can answer this question, but you know, this morning we heard a presentation on this target residue material. You know, we've got enriched uranium coming back from Canada, and I know there's a lot of safety concerns and storage concerns with that. But there's I was thinking in terms of like there's additional cost to EM to process this. There's transportation costs, which sounded like it was absorbed by NNSA, and then there's payment of the blended uranium that TVA uses to produce power. And is this one reason why maybe EM at SRS is getting more money? Is that you have an expense to process this, and then if Canada's paying something to the United States to take this uranium in and process it, that money goes into the general treasury? And we heard the TVA puts money into the general treasury for what they pay for the fuel.
The Canadian fund, the Canadian fuel that we're receiving here at the site, actually it doesn't go into the general treasury. It actually comes to us. So if you look at the nuclear materials budget, this is what EM gets, but then we have money that's over and above that for the Canadian fuel, which is about $15 million a year that we get for processing that Canadian fuel. So it's over and above. So that's how we're dealing with the Canadian fuel. I'm not sure of the TVA stuff. Maxine, I don't know if...
Yeah, and for
There she is. Okay.
the uranium that we give to TVA for them to make fuel, they pay the Treasury
Right,
a
you
cost
said
for that, which we don't see at the site. But we do
Right.
get the money from the Canadians. It's part of the Foreign Fuel Return Program. So there was a contract that was put in place within an SA with the Canadians, and they originally paid $60 million for the modifications and all the equipment that you saw,
Right.
and now they pay $15 million a year for us to do that actual processing.
Right. So am I correct in saying then the EM cost to deal with the Canadian enriched fuel is it's a wash to it's not being used, those funds aren't being used in your budget to take on additional you're getting reimbursed for your cost to just do that project.
That's
over and
correct.
above the mission that you have to deal with all the
That's
defense
correct.
here,
They're
nuclear waste.
paying the incremental cost of processing that fuel, receiving that fuel and us processing. That's what the 15 million for. So EM is not supplementing that program at all.
Right, and I think I was correct in saying the NNSA is responsible for the cost of transporting the Canadian fuel.
The Canadians are actually responsible for all of those transportation costs. It's part of the contract that NNSA established with them. So NNSA is not bearing the cost of that transportation.
Oh, right. In other words, NNSA takes care of the transportation, but they also get reimbursed from the Canadians to wash out that expense. If
Yeah,
you
I don't
will.
know if it's a reimbursement or if the Canadians are doing that ahead of if they're paying for it themselves. I'm not sure which way that is, but I
Okay.
know that the Canadians are responsible for those costs.
Okay. Well, I thought that was an important thing to know, at least financially, that this program that's underway is not costing dollars that could be used to, say, retire tanks and process the original mission for Savannah Riverside. Thank you. Thanks, Jan.
Yep.
Shelley, did you have something that was a text comment?
It's a follow-up question. Yes. So the point that I get
It all goes towards processing of that material.
David?
Dave Babakis, Cap. How often is the guards contract recompeted, and when does that contract end?
It's already expired. Thomas, you want to answer that?
Earlier this morning, I was referring to the Centera contract. So we have one option that's left on that contract, and that option would be from October of 2017 to October, I think it's October 7th of 2019, if the option is exercised. So the current contract will expire October 8th of this year, if we don't exercise the option.
I'm sorry, I thought when you asked the contract, I thought you were talking about the labor agreement with the guards. So if you're talking Centera contract, that's what Thomas is talking about.
If you're talking with the union, that actually expired on the 30th of last month, and you're still going through the negotiations with the union, if that's what you were referring to.
No, I was asking about Centera. Thank you.
Gil?
Gil Allensworth Cab. John, you know you're my favorite presenter every year. I love this stuff. Yeah, everyone laughs at me. So we're going to, as Terry said earlier in his comments this morning, we're moving into 2019 planning. How does 2019 planning set us up with the pension crisis that we're coming up on?
Well, I can't disclose what our target is, but I will tell you that we have a major challenge going into 19 and beyond 19 with dealing with the pension. Headquarters tend to want to keep funding flat across the site, maybe give a little bit of escalation. However, a little bit of escalation is not going to keep pace with our pension increase between 18 and 19. EM's portion of the pension for between 18 and 19 is increasing $56 million. Our buying power in fiscal year 19 is going down by $56 million because of the pension, and it gets worse after 19.
How we've talked about it before, like how much worse?
We peak out, I think in 19, I think the total site pension is about $125 million. We peak in 2023 at $300 million. So between 2019 and 2023, we're going to increase from 125 to $300 million. So we've got a huge challenge. EM has a huge challenge in front of them. Now, in the past, Congress has passed additional pension laws that has given us some relief, okay, that really just kicks the can down the road a little further. Will they do that again? We haven't seen that in the 18 budget, okay, and I don't know that any talk of that's going to come in the 19 budget. So we're getting together with our site management and all the DOE program managers tomorrow to talk about fiscal year 19, and we have a huge problem in front of us. You know, we've got a $56 million hit that we got to take.
So $56 million hit, but if we're at 125, we're going to 300, so we're talking over 100 and whatever percent increase, and we're operating on a 5.5% increase from 17 to 18.
Now you know our problem.
That's one of my biggest concerns, and we're the only site that's dealing with this pension problem.
That is correct.
Out of the entire EM.
That is correct.
Okay.
So,
scares me.
Jack,
All these projects we're talking about, infrastructure projects that Hanford's dealing with, that someone asked a really good question about infrastructure at the site that we're going to have to ignore because we have to take care, and I absolutely have to take care of our pension recipients, and they are first and foremost. But at what cost is it going to, what cost are you and your team going to make the decision of what to cut?
we've got a huge challenge in front of us. So,
hey,
I'll
chip in
tell
$5.
you, even in our 18 budget, you know, we have we're going up $79 million between 17 and 18. There's very little money in there for infrastructure. Very little. It's funding the programs. It's funding, you know, additional saltstone capacity. There's very little money going into infrastructure. And in 19, with the $56 million hit, I don't know that any money is to be going toward infrastructure. So we've got a huge, EM has a huge challenge, and Jack has done a great job in educating headquarters, making sure they know what our challenge is here. We've had several meetings on it with headquarters, with attorneys, with accountants, with actuaries. Nobody's got that silver bullet to say, hey, here's how we can get out of this. Okay, right now the only solution that we see is either pension relief.
I don't know if there's any questions from this, from the full board as to why we came to that decision, but we thought the response that we received was sufficient to the original recommendation. Are there any questions from the full board in regards to 342?
Would someone like to make a motion to close recommendation 342? Perfect. And second? Second. So all those in favor of closing 342, please signify by raising of your right hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
Thank you. All those opposed? And any abstentions? So carried.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So with that, let's move into the voting for the strategic plan recommendation.
Right. Again, Bob Dorcab. Yesterday, David Hoyle, in my absence, brought to the attention of the full board that we had two draft recommendations. One, the SRS strategic plan, and the recommendation manager on that was David Vavakis. And the second recommendation that we had was prescribed fires in regards to the U.S. Forest Service, and the recommendation manager on that was Nina Spinelli. So why don't we work on the strategic, SRS strategic plan first. Yesterday there was discussion. David, were there any changes that needed to be made from yesterday's discussion with the full board?
Dave Labakis, CAB, other than allowing for public input at the same time as the CAB has input, no.
So from the original draft, changes were made, and we have a final draft recommendation. I don't know if it's going to be presented up there.
Chelsea, can you pull that up, please? The strategic plan. Thank you. So were there any questions, comments, or concerns related to this recommendation, to this draft? Seemed like you guys were pretty in favor of it yesterday.
Okay. Okay. If there's no further discussion
Not this one.
or questions regarding this recommendation,
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the strategic plan recommendation? Perfect. Do we have a second? Good. So all those in favor of moving the SRS strategic plan forward as a recommendation, please signify by raising of your right hand.
And that's all 20.
Good. And all opposed? All abstentions? It's so carried. Thank you. And then I guess the second one is the prescribed fire. Bob, do you want to talk about that?
right, prescribed fires. Nina, you were the recommendation manager on this. I don't know if there was any updates or changes that needed to be made per yesterday's meeting.
We did change it just a little bit. For recommendation number 1, we did increase the notification system, so we added a few more entities to it. But I think other than that, the recommendation is pretty much the same that it's been.
Is there any need for any more discussion by the CAB regarding this recommendation?
Good. Do we have a motion to approve this recommendation? Perfect. Second? Perfect. All those in favor, please signify by raising of your right hand.
Unanimous again, all 20.
Good. Well, I'm not going to ask for opposed and abstentions then. Thank you.
All right.
I am done with the committee report for strategic and legacy management. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So let's move over into waste management. Gil, do you have anything that you want to add to your update from yesterday?
I did want to take a moment. I didn't recognize yesterday. Gil Allens with CAB. We did talk about the tour and how wonderful the tour was, and I did want to take a moment to thank Kristen Huber of SRS for putting all that together and to be paying attention to our work plans. So you're really putting us into things that we want to see. So thank you. Now, there's really nothing. We do have Gene Ridley and Shane Farrell. Are we ready to do that? If you're all ready, look forward to the information.
Okay. Forward, backward, laser. Got it. Hello, I'm Jean Ridley with DOE, and I'm the Federal Project Director for Saltstone Disposal Unit number 6. And a little later, Shane Farrell will come up and talk about Saltstone Disposal Units 7 through 12. And I'm just going to call them SDUs, if that's okay. The photo that you have in your handout was old. I'm sorry, I missed that. Here is the correct photo. But this is, many of you have seen this before. I just wanted to put it into perspective where the Saltstone disposal units are. Again, we have the legacy waste in the tanks in the tank farm. They go through either sludge processing to DWPF or through salt processing through ARP MCU or salt waste processing facility when that starts up. The decontaminated salt solution from the salt processing goes into the Saltstone disposal units. Okay? I understand that many of you went out for a tour in late April and saw the Saltstone disposal unit. Pretty impressive, huh? These are just a couple of the photos for the progress of the facility. This is just the bottom, the base mat of it, the columns as they went in, the start of the roof here, and then the completed cell. When you went out there in April, we had just finished basically all the work there. The cell was completed, and the testing inside for the water tightness had been completed, so the project was virtually complete. Many of you had heard about the original failure of the water tightness test, and in which case we went back and installed a liner in the facility. What this little chart says is kind of the progression of how we got there. The first test failed in November. We realized, we did extensive studies and realized that there were problems with cracks in the floor, and eventually it led us down the path to install a liner in the tank. And these are just pictures of prepping for the liner installation. I think at a previous CAB meeting, they showed you some pictures of the liner. I'm not going to really go into it. It's a multi-step process, putting on adhesive, a primer, and then the liner itself. And the liner is about 4 millimeters thick. That's about 1/8 of an inch. And it's basically looks like rubber. Here's just a picture of it going in. You can see the different layers. The blue is an adhesive and an epoxy and the red layer. And they kept a different color so they know exactly where they were in the process during installation. One of the great things is this was a very rigorous process for this liner installation to ensure that at the end the tank was 100% leak tight. And I'm not going to go into all of those steps there. On top of the tank, we have an elaborate grout, I'd say elaborate, a grout delivery system. As the grout is processed in the saltstone production facility, it is pumped through grout lines to the disposal units. And this, for SDU6, there are 9 disposal grout valves. So the grout flows to the top of the unit, and the valves divert it into a hole where it drops down into the tank. The takeaway I want you to have from this is saltstone disposal unit number 6 is complete. We are now in the process of getting the approval for operations. That's basically paperwork exercise. We are anticipating getting the signature by the manager for concurrence to submit that package to headquarters for final approval. As you see here, the original cost estimate was $143.2 million. Our current estimate at complete is $121.8 million, meaning we're over $20 million under budget. We really think it's actually going to come in about 119. The completion date established at what we call CD2, that's our baseline way back when, said November of 2018. That included contingency. And again, we believe we're going to complete and get the manager's concurrence by the end of the month. So we came in a 1.5 years ahead of the baseline schedule. Again, this is just a status overview. We completed the liner December of last year. We passed the hydro test December 28th. We tested the unit by pumping in clean grout into the tank to show that the process all worked. DOE completed its validation of the contractor's readiness assessment in April, and now the approval to commence operations is going through the routing process. Expect the manager's approval by the end of the month, and then it goes to headquarters for EM1 to sign. Any questions on the SDU6? Okay, thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to Shane to talk about, oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
We'll go to Mr. Malik first. And then do Nina.
Narendra Malik, CAB. I have a question. Since SDU6 is located far away, and I believe the grout line is very long, have you tested that on the joints of the grout line, the grout won't deposit and have blockage? Although I know you're sending pig every day, but still, from past experience, have you learned from the lessons learned from SUD2, where there were pump failures and other things?
Absolutely. They tested the grout lines. If you remember, if you went out there, SDUs 3 and 5 are even further away from the production facility, and we're pumping into those now. We've not had any issues other than routine, maintenance type issues with the grouts and the pumps. They did test the pump for SDU 6. There was some initial problems with the sizing of that pump and some vibration, but they did some extensive repairs and stabilized that pump, and we did the clean grout run to SDU 6, and they verified that it could meet the flow rate that we needed to pump into 6 for the life.
Thank you.
Nina Spinelli, CAP. So my question might be complex, but if you just have like a mini answer, that would be great. For the coming in $20 million under budget and a year and a half under, do you know how you did that?
Good project management.
Good, that's a good answer.
But seriously, it's a combination of things. When you establish a baseline, you factor in risk, and if those risks aren't realized, then you save that money. That's the bottom line for costs. Now, again, we factor in the risk that it might leak, and we had some money to cover that. Unfortunately, that one risk didn't overrule, and still allowed us to come in way under budget. Same for the schedule. There's contingency in schedules because you always have, issues with weather, different things like that. And we challenged the contractor to come in sooner because we wanted this facility up and ready before salt waste processing began.
Thank you, Jean.
Okay. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Shane, who will cover SDU 7 through 12.
Good afternoon. My name is Shane Farrell. I have two jobs. I am the Deputy Federal Project Director for the Salt Waste Processing Facility Project. My boss, Pam's back there. I think you all know her. And I'm also the recently named Federal Project Director for SDUs 7, 8, and 9 so far. So I want to talk to you about 7 through 12. And as it says, I am the FPD for 7, 8, and 9. And what we've wanted to do on site was some changes in Jim and Jean's organization and the experience that Pam and I and the team have had in successful construction thus far with SWPF. The site thought it was a good idea to go ahead and bring that knowledge and expertise into use as we move forward in the SDUs. So therefore, I have been named the Federal Project Director and will be using a lot of lessons learned and people that were used in the successful construction of SWPF as we move forward, along with Jim's folks and Gene and others. So the remaining SDUs will be designed and built just like number 6 that Gene talked about. It is my goal at the end of the day, when you stand on top of an SDU, from here on out, you won't know which one you're standing on unless there's a sign indicating which one you're on. We learned a lot of good things, as we've talked about in project management and the design with the liner, et cetera, that have worked well for 6, and we think we want to take that momentum into account as we move forward building 7 through 12. Here is our mission need timeline. This is extracted from the Liquid Waste System Plan Rev 20, which I think most of you are familiar with. But the bottom line is, as you can see, the construction and operations of the SDUs are staggered based on the system plan need for SWPF output. So I kind of, having two jobs, kind of have a vested interest here. As we get SWPF completed, we got to have a place to put the waste. And so it's kind of a good progression, building the machine that helps process the waste and then having a place to put it. So as you can see by the chart, and I believe you have this on your screens, we are just about, finish to start, finish to start, finish to start. What we want to try to do moving forward is to optimize the lessons learned from 6 as we move into 7 and go on to 8 through 12, overlap as much as we can. You know, if we build these on a individual unit by unit basis, you have deployment of people on the site, you have deployment off, you build it, you come and you go. But if we can set these up where as soon as you finish one section of one, like say the floor, you move right to another one and build the floor, we think we can optimize quite a bit in time and therefore save money as we do these going forward. So as you can see, we go from 2013 out to 2030, from 6 to 12, start to finish. Let's talk about 7 for a second. As you've heard earlier today, we recently got funding to start work in 7. We got a new start approval by Congress, and we got funding as a resolution of the CR, and the budget passed. We also, in the world of project management, we received Critical Decision 1 last month, which is the approval of the alternative selection and cost range. Basically, that's a paper exercise, but it allows us to move forward and start construction or design and construction of SDU 7. The cost range is 110 to 170. As Jean talked about, she's going to come in somewhere in the 120 range. As at this early in the process, before we've developed a baseline, we're required to have a cost range. And here again, we have a high end on the cost range because of potential risks that we might encounter that we don't know about yet. So we want to make sure we have adequate funding to support those risks until we develop a baseline. Looking forward here, since we did get the new start approval and we did get funding, we have what we call CD3A, which is long lead procurements. In this case, what we want to start doing is some site prep, and I'll show you a picture in just a minute. Some long lead site prep that prepares the area where SDU 7 is going to go to actually start construction. About 2 months after that, hopefully November or December timeframe, we will have what we call CD2, which is baseline development and start of construction. And then the plan to start operations is October of 2022. However, that does include 23 months of contingency, schedule contingency. We are shooting for this November 20th, November 2020 date to meet the liquid waste system plan need. But as we develop our project, we have to take it out to the far end to account for risk and schedule and risk. Okay, here you go. As you can see right here, here's SDU 6 that we just talked about. This is SDUs 2A and 2B. And here's where SDU 7 is going. So the question is, gee, how are you going to build an SDU on top of trailers? That's part of that CD3A that I'm talking about right now that we're jumping on right now, okay? We have to relocate these trailers. These trailers house the construction craft. Okay, there's a fab shop. Also, what you can't see is there's some above ground right here and some underground utilities and some drainage ditches that we need to get relocated. So basically, we clear all that out, we start the site prep, and that's where 6 is going to go. I'm sorry, 7 will be. So let's talk about beyond SDU 7. As you can see by this chart here, 6 is right here, 7 is going here, 8 and 9 will be here, 10, 11, and 12 will be on the south side of the salt stone processing facility. We have received already this spring mission need approval, i.e. the ability to start working on SDUs 8 and 9. We got that in March. We are also planning to start design for 8 and 9 in the fall, if not sooner. And we're also trying to get approval for mission need for remaining SDUs 10 through 12 in the fall. However, we're working right now on that. We should be able to expedite that and get those approvals a little bit sooner than the fall. So therefore, we will have at least mission need approval for all remaining SDUs. Are there any questions?
Mr. Mallett put his up first, so let's start with him.
Narendra Malik, CAB. Have you received all the necessary permits for land disturbance and land use for the building of SRS 7 through 12?
Deciding?
Land use.
Yes,
permits?
Do we have all the permits
Yeah.
in place for 7 through 12? No, we get those permits as we go along. Correct, Gene? So no, we don't have them all yet.
Okay, my another question is, how about the industrial landfill permits? Are you going to apply one permit for all remaining SUDs or one permit?
That's a great question. One of the things that we're trying to do, and we're not 100% there yet, in project management space, as we do each project, we have certain requirements that we have to do to complete to build these SDUs. To the extent that we can, we are trying to maximize and put those together and get as many one-time approvals as we can. There are certain places where we cannot do that. But to the extent that we can, we will try to be more efficient and get blanket permits for the remaining SDUs as we go forward.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, let's go down to Susan.
Susan Corbett, Cab. So is there going to be a liner in all of these, or is that just in that one?
The liner, as we are planning it right now, will go in every one of them. The successful leak test with the liner and the process that it was done has proven very successful, and our intent is to go ahead and put a liner in every one of them.
So this liner is made of rubber, is that what I heard you
Yes.
say? So what is the life expectancy of a rubber liner?
Well, Gene, Jim, I mean, I guess the point is we fill these SDUs, right? The grout will become solidified, and the liner should maintain itself for the life of the SDU. And so, at some point in time, no.
So once it gets in there, it's a grout. It's like a concrete.
It's grout.
It's grout.
It'll
So
harden.
It'll
That's
harden.
correct. Yes.
Now, if there is a radioactive component here, you haven't gotten all of it out, so there is some radioactivity going on. Does that will that in somehow cause the liner to eventually decay, or is this something that will last the lifetime of the material that's in there? That's my question.
Gene?
Yeah, Gene Ridley, DOE. The answer to your question is it really doesn't matter about the liner. If you know, we built SDUs 2, 3, and 5 without a liner.
Right.
The grout itself is the protective barrier, not the liner. The liner is just there for leak tightness in this case. We wanted it leak tight short term until the grout hardens. Once it's hard, the liner's irrelevant.
Okay. Let me think. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's come back up. Dan, I think you were next.
Could you go to your slide 16, please? So just a question. I made a joke to Gil, but it's a serious question. Right now, SDU 7 is going where the trailers are, correct?
Yes, sir.
Where are you moving the trailers? Because I'd hate to see them move to 8, and then to 9, and then to 10.
That's a great point. Part of the site prep work that we're going to do for SDU 7 will have tangential benefits for 8 and 9. The trailers will be over there, nominally in that area right there.
Thanks.
So the whole point is, let's do this once. You're absolutely right. Let's not move them as we go. Let's take care of the people and the trailers one time, so they'll be there for the long run for the entire rest of the completion of the construction for all the remaining SDUs.
Great.
All right, and then we'll go all the way down to David.
Hi, Shane.
Hey, David.
David Hoyle, Cab. Shane, for SDU 6 and for the remainder ones, are they directly contracted with DOE for construction? Or is that a subcontractor of SRR?
At this point in time, SDU 6 built by SRR and had subcontracted forces, correct, Gene?
That's correct.
Okay. Currently for SDU 7, it is our intention to utilize SRR, and if they bring in any subs, that will be the case, or the liquid waste contractor. As we move forward, as I talked about optimization, we are not 100% who is going to do that. So that option is available down the road if we find a better way to do that.
I see. And I heard you say that there's going to be liners in each ones. Will there be monitoring wells or lysimeters under each?
We have that, right? The plan is to remaining SDUs with the same design that we used for 6.
In the
Yes.
past,
Say that we've had the same success that Jim and Jean had for SDU 6.
Susan, I think.
I just have one more question. So there's no way for any sort of water to come in contact with any of the contents? It's not going to come up through the groundwater, or there's no possibility of water coming in contact with the waste?
Based on the leak test that was performed for SDU 6 at 41 feet high, and the liner, we do not believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Robert Smith, CAB. As I understand, there was significant savings in going to these large tanks, the SBU 6 and 7, etc. Do we have an overall projection of what the long-term savings are going to be?
Jean, I believe you did those studies. I remember reading this the other day, but go ahead.
I believe the long-term studies was close to $500 million.
That's exactly what I was going to say, around 500 million.
Okay. Is there anything else? Shane, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Okay, so where are we? Do we want to take a 10-minute break? Oh, recommendation closure. Gosh, I can't believe I forgot that. Gil, you still have things to do. 339 and 340. Let's take a look at that.
Thanks, facilitator. Okay, gotcha. Waste Management Committee at the last committee meeting brought forth recommendations to close recommendation 339. Do we have it on screen or? Thank you much. There it is. Can we go down to the recommendation, please? So, as the Waste Management Committee spoke, our recommendation was the Savannah River Citizens Advisory Board recommends that the Department of Energy focus on core scenario 3, which provides an accelerated cleanup schedule for the material and work with the prescribed methods to secure additional funding to accelerate the program. We felt that the response was sufficient, and at this point, I'll kick it to Nina so she can take a vote.
Thank you. All those in favor of, or I'm sorry, this is your fault for starting a bad precedent. Do we have a motion to close 339? Do we have a second?
Sure.
Perfect. All those in favor of closing 339, raise your right hand.
Good job.
All those opposed, raise your right hand. And abstentions. Okay. Thank you so much. And Gil, do you want to go into 340?
At that last committee meeting, we also spoke about 340. I'm sure we're pulling that up here momentarily. Thank you very much. And we'll scroll down to the recommendation. And this was the recommendation where we asked DOE to identify the person or persons who first broached the idea of converting glass waste storage building number 1 to double stacking configuration, and introduce the persons at the future CAB meeting, full board meeting, so that they may be publicly recognized. If y'all remember at the last full board meeting, we had the DOE did a very nice job, a very fine job of recognizing the people involved. So at this point, we are ready to close this recommendation. Nina?
Thank you. Do we have a motion to close 340? Thank you. Do we have a second? Thank you. All those in favor signify by raising of your right hands. Thank you. So no opposed and no abstentions. Thank you.
And that's it from Waste Management. Thanks, James.
So we have a break schedule currently. Does anybody feel compelled to take it? Do y'all want to power through the next one? Y'all are good to go? Cool. Kathy, did you need to stretch?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I need a break. She wants M&Ms.
I do want M&M's.
10 minutes then. Let's come back in 10 minutes. I know. Let's all go. We're close enough. Okay. I think we got enough. Are y'all ready to get started again?
Yeah.
Kathy, for FDSR, do you have anything that you want to add to yesterday's update?
You ready for me?
I am ready for you.
Gil, he's ready for me.
Fine, I'm not bringing you a birthday present on the 13th. Sorry, Kathy.
That's okay. Kathy Patterson, CAB, Vice Chair, Facilities Disposition and Site Remediation Committee. Our committee members are Don Gillis, Chair, Eric Crossan, William Roden, Robert Smith, Nina Spinelli, Earl Shepherd, Ed Sturkin, and Joyce Underwood. Our committee purpose is on the screen. Questions you can ask.
I have a draft.
potentially you'll run out of time.
David, I agree. That was one of the things that I had thought about. But one of the changes that we're going to be doing is that instead of duplicate presentations for our committee meetings and then having them here at the full board, the committee meetings will be more focused on those recommendations and discussions. So the goal is that when the committees who are producing these recommendations get together and meet, they can handle those discussions. And then when the support team sends out these recommendations, people read them, people email, and people have that concern. One of the things that I found is that we have a lot of duplicate discussion from committee meeting to committee meeting. And if we can make sure during our committee meetings that we use our time and handle the discussions, I think an hour for 1 to 3 discussions is enough time. But again, it can change as we experiment with it.
So I see a number of cards up. Does anyone have a comment to that point? Yeah. Okay, Gil.
Gil Cap. To that point, David, that was a conversation at the ad hoc meeting that was handled thoroughly. And I believe in my takeaway from the ad hoc meeting, it was we need to place some significance on the committee meetings. The committee meetings are the place where we should have the vigorous debate. We should have the discussions. And it's not to say they shouldn't happen at the full board meeting. However, the nuts and bolts of a recommendation should be done at the committee meeting. So if it's something, to Nina's point, where she said we have email, we have things, we know what's coming down the pipe, we need to attend committee meetings and have those conversations there. So that was my takeaway from it, was we were to encourage and empower committee meetings and not turn the full board meeting into committee meetings, which we currently have now.
Well, I guess I understand that rationale, but a large portion of the full board is not at all committee meetings. And so they're going to have thoughts about an issue that they weren't able to express in the committee. They won't have heard it until they've attended the full board, if they're not on that committee. And I just think you're not giving enough importance to our primary product.
Sure. I think Dan had his hand up.
What I would say, and I think that there's a definite counterpoint to what I'm about to say, is I think of it almost in the opposite of what you are saying. By putting at the end of the day, if more discussion is required, we can go longer if we need to. We could. Nothing says it. I think if we put it at the beginning of the day, Nina's like, nope.
No.
But if we put it at the beginning of the day, I think we might feel that time crunch where we need to move to the next thing. And that's a counterpoint, but I don't know that it's necessarily the end all be all.
Well, and I think part of what you have to look at too, David, and this is something that stuck with me. If you look from 2:45 to 3:15, we have the committee updates. And if they're not going to be discussing a recommendation, a committee update will take 5 minutes to, discuss their next meeting time and things like that. So the bulk of what we talk about during each committee discussion that we have like today is on those draft recommendations. If you look at the times, chances are we're going to have a lot more time that's on here to talk about those draft recommendations. And then I know Dan has been waiting patiently. Yes. Can we go to Dan and then Gil?
Dan Kaminsky, Cab. Just one quick question. Day one, is that now a formal day? Will the public still be allowed to interact the way we have been interacting with them on day one?
What do you want?
I kind of like their input. Yesterday, I thought was a very healthy conversation with some of the input we got from the attendees. And this, obviously, since we're opening up the meeting in a formal manner, does this then preclude that to keep the public to the public comments section only?
I wouldn't think so, and I don't think we should see it that way.
And then my only other comment was, this is an excellent draft. Thank you to the ad hoc committee for putting in the extra time. Unfortunately, it was during the day, and I can't make those all the time. But that being said, I would encourage everyone here to realize none of us on the cab today chose our current agenda of the way these meetings were set up. So this is a whole new brave world that we're taking a stab at reformulating and choosing our destiny. And I would encourage everyone, since a lot of people put a thought into this and seemingly discuss some of these hotter topics to a great degree, that we try it, see it, and if we absolutely hate it, then we bring it up and we change it.
That's a really good point. Can we go Gil and then Susan and then
Well,
Bob?
you know, some of these folks had theirs before Gillen. Hold on to it for just a little bit. Okay, thank you. Susan, I know yours was actually up next.
Susan Corbett Cab. Well, you know, I applaud the effort because I'm always in favor of making meetings more efficient and using everybody's time wisely. I am concerned about, though, if you let it all get decided in committee, it comes in like a done deal, and you don't really get the robust input of everybody, or maybe even members of the public if they didn't attend the committee meeting either. One of the things that could help is if you have a contentious recommendation, you could have a majority and a minority report so that both opinions are heard before you take it to the larger group. The other thing that you could do, I mean, when you go to these committee meetings, you're there till 6:30 anyway. I would just say tag 2 more hours at the end of this and just let us go from 1 to 6. I mean, if you go to the committee meetings, you go from 4:30 to 6:30 or later. I don't, you know, we're here. Rather than rush through it, let's just tag another hour or 2 at the end of it and get it and have plenty of time for rigorous debate on these things.
Sure, and that's a good point. Susan, we also have the admin and outreach committee meeting that meets. Afterwards? Yeah, we meet afterwards for that. But I think if we can, because, you know, the ad hoc committee spent a lot of time going over it, and part of their discussion has been that. And with these times, the times are not set in stone. So if there is a recommendation that does come up that is really hot and that people, you know, we think it's going to get a lot of attention, we will allocate more time for it so that it is discussed properly. But like today with the prescribed fires and the strategic plan, I mean, those had been talked about and emailed about. And then, you know, today also, Mr. Pope from the EPA couldn't be here, so that freed up 20 minutes. So I think it's almost like a living document that the times can be changed as long as the structure is what we're looking at.
And I want you to keep in mind too, if you look at the speed with which we tend to run through the committee updates, I look at this and some of y'all are thinking, wow, how we don't have enough time. And I'm looking at it and thinking, man, we're going to wind up with a little bit of extra time at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it'll be
And so when we put this together, it was with the inverse of the effect that you're afraid might happen, or with that in mind. I'm looking to try and generate more discussion around the table amongst the CAB members. I want you to engage more than you are now. And so what I'm hoping is that this change will allow that. If you notice, on the first day, there's no presentations, none at all. And that's on purpose, because your time will be dedicated to discussing these topics with each other, updating the discussions that you had at the committee meeting, that bringing back those rich discussions that you had at the committee meeting, and updating everyone here, and then talking about your draft recommendations that you have. And I think that you're going to have a lot of time with it.
Gil, did you want to go? And then I think, is that Kathy? And then Bob.
Bob's been waiting.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob Dorcab. Nina, I think that the ad hoc committee did a very good job looking at what we've done in the past and how we can make it better for the future. I think James Tanner just got into some of the highlights of how this can work. You know, I think that we're in a paradigm shift here if we're going to do this, and that is using the committee meetings as the focus to have like very, well, I'll call informal discussions about a recommendation that has been drafted by one of the committee members. And it's my understanding that, you know, everyone in the CAB is made aware of the committee's meeting date and agenda and draft recommendations, so that there really is no, in my opinion, there's no issue with any board member, whether you're on that committee or not, having an opportunity to voice their interest or concerns about a draft recommendation. And so there should be really, that's the paradigm shift, is that using the committee meetings, instead of the committees meetings having presentations that were also then represented back to the full board, that was very redundant. And that's been eliminated. And now the committee meetings really, in my opinion, consist of an opportunity to have plenty of time to discuss recommendations. I know the last Strategic and Legacy Management Committee that we had, there was quite a bit of discussion about the recommendations that were drafted for that meeting.
That's a really good point.
Yeah,
And so that worked out very well. And then we wound up, actually, after the discussion was convened, we ended the meeting, I think, 5 or 10 minutes early. So I think if everyone on the tab can just remember that just because you're not on that committee doesn't mean that you can't attend the meeting either in Aiken, or that you can't just come online. And if you come online, you have the opportunity to speak up through the audio portion of the online committee meeting, right?
Or if you're not able to do that, go back and watch the recording and see the debate that happened about the draft yourself.
Right, and then you'd be better prepared to discuss it at the full board meeting. So there's still being time allowed at the full board meeting to discuss recommendations that are going to be proposed to the full board. But I really think you can get a lot done right at the committee level. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think what we're going to do is go to Kathy, Gil, and then John, and then take it up for a vote, if that's good for everyone.
Kathy Patterson, CAB. Question is, committee updates, what were we planning for the committees to do when you do the committee updates? Is that just where we do the purpose and the members and the meetings and any other?
When I first started, those committee updates consisted of a lot more. And we had a couple of chairs who wanted to add in a PowerPoint for fill 5 slides.
Oh.
I mean that's what
well,
it is.
That's what I'm asking. Is it necessary for us to call out the committee members? Is it necessary for us? Because that could cut down some time.
It is not a requirement.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that.
Because, that's what I'm saying. That could be some time cut down.
We email the chairs.
Do more of what you said.
That's a good idea,
We
Kathy,
email the
to
chairs
cut
as a
that.
template.
And then
Then
use
that
that
would
time.
cut down, and that would give, as everyone else was saying, that would give more time to discuss. If they came and really gave the updates of what happened in the committee meeting, then when it got time for the draft recommendations, most of the time what's going to happen is those that were not at the meeting. Then that's where most of the discussion should come from.
That's a great point. Good.
But Kathy, also,
Kathy.
remember, and all board members, remember, the committee meetings themselves now do not include any presentations. So if you're not having any presentations, that's 2 hours, virtually 2 hours of time that can be used to discuss committee business, and that's all a matter of record. And then also these draft recommendations, as they pop up, there should be very vigorous discussion at the committee level about the merits of the recommendation and any improvements that can be made. And we should encourage all board members to take note of what the committees are discussing, and they have the opportunity to participate at those committee meetings. And then this meeting would be more of a, not a rubber stamp, but the amount of give and take that would need to go on with a recommendation at these meetings should be less and more at the committee level. I guess that's what I'm saying.
That's a good point, Bob. And then Gil, do you want to give your point, and then John, and then we'll go
You
to.
said John first. You go to John.
I think I said Gil first.
No. Gil wants to.
Gil wants to go last. Okay.
I'm just following the
That's fine. Okay, so we'll have John and then Gil, and then we will take a vote.
I'd rather go last.
Oh my gosh, no, one of you just go. This poor ad hoc committee spent such a long time doing this, and they worked so hard.
John McMichael Cap. I think if you look at the progression that should take place from a committee is where you get the real grunt work, real hard work is preparing an idea to go into the work session the first day. So I think what you're suggesting and what you just said, James, earlier was very much on point, that it's going to be more work on the committee if we do and function as we should as a committee to prepare it. Then you come into the work session, then you've prepared the item and you've done all the what ifs and what fors, and so you can really zero in on the proper method of taking it forward, what you need to do, and what kind of recommendations you need to make, so that when you do come into the final day and you do the regular presentation to the full board, that you've got something that makes sense, that we can talk about on a much higher level. Right. So we've cut out a lot of the needless questions that go forward that don't really need or don't really add to anything. So from that standpoint, I think what you're talking about is right. And the final point I want to make is this, that whatever we decide to do today is not written in stone. We can make changes, we can modify it when we see what we're going forward. So change is good when you're doing it for the right reason.
I was actually just about to say that, just as a reminder, whatever you approve today, yes, we're going to implement this for July. There's also going to be a discussion at the end of the July meeting where I'm going to ask you what worked, what didn't work, what do we need to fix again, and we're probably going to keep having that discussion until you don't give me any more answers.
So if we do it as you prescribed, I think we're going to see a more effective, more meaningful, and some issues and ideas that come up with more meat in it that are more substantive. So I'm all in favor of doing that. In fact, I'll go ahead and put the motion forth after Gil has his comment. Thank you.
Susan, did you have something that just, Gil, do you mind if Susan goes in front of you and
Go
then
right
you can have the last part of it? Susan, did you want to add something to it?
I just was thinking that, I mean, I hate the idea of giving up any presentations on day one, because it might be that we find that we want a presentation on something that we're going to discuss later in the afternoon. I'm just thinking about today about the bees. Maybe, if we were going to make a decision about bees, we might want to bring in a bee specialist to talk about that or something. I hate the idea of completely giving up the idea of having any presentations on the first day.
And I understand that. That's understandable. Even with the recommendations that we could come up with, there would have been no way to have a presentation, based on the recommendation for today. And I think one of the things that will work out really well is that as we're in committee meetings, when these recommendations are coming up, before they come to the full board committee saying, do we feel comfortable with this? Do we need more information about this? And actually having time at committee meetings to have those longer discussions instead of, we have an hour-and-a-half presentation, we have 15 minutes left to have a committee discussion. So I'm hoping that by having more time at our committee meeting, we can actually flesh those out a little bit more, so that when we do come to the full board and you do have questions like you have, we'll have better answers. And then Gil, do you want to finish us out?
This debate, and I encourage it going on until 4 o'clock. I think we should be able to have an open debate and open dialogue. But this debate is a perfect example of what we want to do. We met last full board meeting, and we discussed this, and it was a pretty hot topic. I mean, people were interested. We voted to suspend the conversation and go to an ad hoc committee and have the ad hoc committee bring the information back. The ad hoc committee was open to everyone. Now, obviously, people have to work and schedules don't always allow, but the ad hoc committee got together, worked an entire afternoon, and this is what came back. Now, as a full board, we want to sit and rehash the committee meeting, which we spent an afternoon to do in committee. This is redundant. So all the conversation is great, and this is the time to have it because we're talking about making a pretty big change. But we have been doing this redundancy for the 2.5 years I've been on board. And James, I appreciate you saying, we can come back at the end of July. I disagree with you on that. I think we should come back at the end of December.
Okay.
And not just say 1 month, well, it didn't work for me this month, so let's have this 2-hour conversation. I didn't like this. Narinder loved it. Dan kind of liked it. And we can have this conversation. But we need to give it more than just 1 month to come back and revisit it. We need to have 2-3 meetings and then say, okay, this worked or this didn't work.
That's a good point.
Because if we keep coming back month after month, we're never going to have anything. But that ad hoc meeting, my takeaway from it was committees are important. And if we don't move this forward the way it is, there's no point in having committee meetings anymore. We might as well just have full board meetings and talk about everything at a full board meeting, because that's where we're going. If we do not have strong committee meetings, and that's what committee meetings are for. Have strong committee meetings, bring the findings to the full board, and then the full board can vote yes, no. You can abstain, and we can have something not get approved and say send it back to committee, come back with something better. We can do that as a board. So that's my frustration, is like, let's just have committee meetings or not, if that's what we choose.
Okay. Thank you. And I think July is asking a lot to have a conversation like that. What I would like is to have it in either September or December to give it 1 or 2 cycles. What I would encourage y'all to do is, as we are going through that July meeting, as you think of things that you might like or dislike or you're worried about times, just jot those down on your agenda so we could come back together again as a group maybe in 3 or 6 months and figure out if this is working or if this needs to change. And with that, do we have a motion to approve this agenda going forward?
Got a quarter dozen.
Yay! Do we have a second to go with this quarter dozen? Thank you. And we've had our discussion. Does anybody have any last? Okay. All those in favor of taking this new board agenda to our July meeting, please signify by raising of your right hand.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19.
19. All those opposed? Any abstentions?
1 abstention.
Well, thank you all so much. And again, please really, as we go through our July meeting, take some notes and take some ideas of how you feel like this is working or how this isn't working for you. With that, we're going to go into public comment. Do you know if anyone is signed up?
Does anyone want to make a public comment?
Do we have any public? Alrighty, you sure we're good? Well, we're up to the adjournment part of our meeting. Before that, does anyone from around the table have anything that they want to share or add? Any thoughts or comments?
You guys did a lot today.
They did do a lot.
You passed 2 chairs' recommendations that are going to have a national impact.
Maxine has something.
Just a warning, there was a tornado watch that was sent out for the site, so be careful driving home. The weather's going to be bad.
It's going to be a fun drive to Columbia. Well, with that, I want to thank y'all so much for coming, and I hope y'all have a safe drive home. And yes, still so. I know as we talk about safety, with everything that's happened in the last 24 hours, I think also would do it. Just being cognizant of your safety and the work that goes on at the site. Thank you.
I'm going to hang out here for a little bit.
I'm not.
No, it's gonna,
I feel
that's
so
not-
bad,
that's just
like when you're
barely
in
a
court
drizzle.
and they're like, and then